Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Hidden Heroes of Tech podcast shows, sponsored by therevenuedoc.com. While we wait for our guest to ring the doorbell to the studio, let me give you an introduction. Our guest today is Derek Osgood. Derek is a dynamic leader in the tech marketing space, currently serving as the founder and CEO of Ignition, where he drives product success through innovation AI solutions. With a robust background that comes from classical brand marketing and an entrepreneurial mindset, Derek has demonstrated his expertise in navigating the startup growth trenches and leading teams to consistent double-digit monthly growth across diverse markets. Prior to his current role, Derek spent over a decade leading and scaling marketing teams at renowned brands like PlayStation, BBVA, and Rippling. He has launched over 100 products as a product marketeer, collectively generating over $1 billion in revenue. His experience in these major companies has equipped him with a comprehensive skill set in go-to-market strategies, segmentation, product positioning, and digital performance marketing. His leadership at Ignition not only focuses on leveraging AI to streamline customer and market data, but also emphasizes creating actionable plans and marketing assets that resonate with customers' exact language. He is an active participant in the Future Trends of Marketing Insights and Innovation Group and a well-respected voice in the product marketing community. He regularly shares insights on avoiding common pitfalls in product marketing and strategies to enhance efficiency and strategic focus. This is your host, Mickey Barat, and I thank you for joining this episode of our Hidden Heroes of Tech podcast. Today's topic is Powerless Profits, when product marketing defines strategy but can't pull the strings. Derek is going to share his unique perspective on the challenges product marketers face when they define a strategy but lack the authority to execute. Oh, that must be Derek. 1 second. Is he here? There you go. Hi, Derek. How you doing?
Hey, Mickey. Not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you on today's show. Hey, is there anything in the introduction that I've missed that you'd like to add? Because you're quite an accomplished individual.
I feel like you talked me up pretty well. I was getting excited about myself off of that.
Awesome. I hope it helps you in some way or form. Anyway, so look straight into it. First of all, the show's topic today is Powerless Profits, when product marketing defines strategy but can't pull the strings. Look, I want you to just give us a teaser what the topic's about, because I want to get into you personally first. But give us a bit of a teaser. Why this topic and what's going on here?
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about the fact that, in my opinion, product marketing is fundamentally one of the most impactful and important roles within a company, and it can really, truly shape the success or failure of a new product or, a broader company on the whole. But it's also one of the roles that is the most misunderstood within companies and is often the most disempowered to actually impact that change. And so, we're going to kind of talk about like all the dynamics that contribute to that, and then, how they can kind of get out of that mode a bit.
Awesome. It sounds like you've got some interesting insights to share with us. But before we get into that, is it okay if I ask you a few questions about you? Because I think it's important that, the audience understands who Derek is. Would that be okay?
Yeah, hit me.
Awesome. All right. So here's the first question. Really easy one. What did you have for breakfast today?
I had a protein bar and a couple handfuls of beef jerky.
That sounds like it's an efficient way of just getting something done and getting out of the door. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm on a big health kick. So it's a lot of just like protein, and nothing else. And it's just shoveling fuel into my body.
So your breakfast is about a healthy regime, I guess. So is it working for you?
Oh yeah, I've actually lost 100 pounds in the last 2 years. So
holy moly, 100 pounds. I'm actually on a weight loss regime, but it's not about that. And I'll get some tips off you afterwards. Okay, next question. How are you doing for real?
I'm doing great. It's Friday, heading into the weekend. It's starting to get sunny here in Los Angeles. So, I'm doing pretty well.
Is there something really positive about today that you woke up and say, that's really cool?
We had some good movement with one of the customers that we've been, in a deal cycle with, and that was like super exciting. There's some other things like on the product front that like got me really jazzed, which I can't talk about yet. But
yeah.
So
you're buzzing.
Stuff going on with work.
Yeah. So work's buzzing, you're creating a buzz around you today. That's good. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Okay. Here's an interesting question. If you had to pick one superpower, to fly or to be invisible, which one would you choose and why?
It's a tough one. I think I'd probably go with flying, just because I love travel and like being able to get around without having to go sit through the airport would just be so nice. And I think all the use cases for being invisible would be a lot more, a lot less like wholesome. I'd be robbing banks and whatnot.
So you're going to be that sinister guy if you went in being invisible. Yeah, that's interesting. Many people who say they want to be invisible say, "I just want to be in a fly on a wall and listen in." I went, "Yeah, really?"
Yeah, I feel like there's not that many like okay use cases for being invisible.
I appreciate the honesty because I think I'd be in your camp with that one. Okay, so here's an interesting question. So when you go to job interviews for places like McKinsey and the Boston Group, outside of the technical work that they're interviewing you for, they want to understand how their candidate operates, and they give a little bit of a problem-solving question. And it's quite interesting how people solve these questions. And I've got an interesting question for you, and I'd love to hear how you solve it. So here it is. You've been given an elephant. You can't give it away or sell it. What would you do with the elephant?
Can't give it away or sell it. I mean, elephants are pretty productive animals. I feel like I'd find some way to end up like putting to work and turning it into some kind of productive. Like I'd have to have a farm first, so I think I'd have to change my lifestyle a bit. I don't think I could fit an elephant in my apartment, so I think I'd have to probably move to the country. I'd take the elephant and I'd probably start farming, and I feel like it would live a long happy life, kind of working alongside me. And but I don't know. I don't know. There's not too many uses for an elephant. Like I'd also probably just, elephants are cute. Like I'd probably just want to like hang out with it and have it be a pet.
I think it's pretty impressive that you're willing to change your lifestyle to accommodate the elephant in your life.
Well, I feel bad. Like if I ended up forcing it into my lifestyle, living in my apartment in LA, it would have a terrible life.
Yeah, well, or you could just leave it outside, avoid using the lift, and get the elephant to use its trunk to lift you to your apartment. I don't know. There you go. Interesting. All right. Next question. Thank you for the answer. Next question. What is your spiciest opinion that most people disagree with?
I don't know how much people would like necessarily disagree with this. They definitely get their feathers ruffled a little by it. But one of the ones that I always fall back on here is like the product is a marketing function. And, I think I've like believed that. And it's not necessarily saying that like product is subservient to marketing, but just that product is at its core the work of understanding customers, developing a product for a specific market. And that is like by definition classical marketing. And I think everybody thinks about marketing these days as like the promotion portion of the 4, 7, 5 P's, however many P's you want to talk about. But product is really one of the core ones in there as well. And so I think it's always funny to me, like people talk about Steve Jobs is like one of the greatest product people of all time, but they also talk about him as one of the greatest marketers of all time. And it's because those two things are so inextricably linked.
Right. So what's the spicy bit in that? So I think what you're saying is pretty reasonable. So what's spicy about that?
Well, I think the idea, like, I think if you talk to any product person, they would feel fairly insulted by somebody saying that, their role is a marketing job, because I think a lot of product teams kind of look down on marketing as just promotion and kind of the advertising side of things.
Oh, wow.
So I think, by and large, most product teams would pretty heavily disagree with me there.
That's some sort of deviation of diversity, isn't there? Or inclusion in some way or form in terms of job role, I would say, bizarrely. Oh my God. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was that tenuous. Okay. Back to today's topic, powerless profits. When product marketing defines strategy but can't pull the strings, and it sounds like you already just hit on that with your spicy opinion. So let's deep dive a little bit. So talk to me about what this actually means.
Yeah. So sorry, can you repeat that? I just missed the.
Yeah. So, powerless profits when product marketing defines strategy but can't pull the strings. This is our topic for today. You sort of just touched on that, I think, in your spiciest opinion. But tell me a little bit more, and tell the audience a little bit more about what this actually means, and give us a bit of a framework of what it means.
Yeah, so I think like the funny thing about product marketing is like a lot of companies, because they don't really understand what product marketing does, they tend to land in a place where they believe that product marketing is what they see as the output of product marketing, which is functionally like the creation of content, collateral, like copywriting. It's kind of all the assets that product marketing delivers to the organization. And so essentially, like they start thinking about product marketing as this just like output content creative function. But the reality is, like, product marketing as it is truly defined is fundamentally a strategy role. It's about actually identifying what markets the company should be targeting with what products, and determining how to best package and price and position those products in order to capture those markets, which is like very much company level strategy work, which like impacts the work that a lot of other teams are doing. And product marketers, when fully empowered, can really, really significantly impact the success or failure of a company by pulling those levers. And it's one of the only roles that is actually uniquely equipped to impact those, to pull those levers, because it's one of the only roles that actually has the purview across the organization to be able to see all the like real problems and bottlenecks that exist across multiple different teams. But because the organization like so often doesn't understand what product marketing really is at its core, and product marketing is such a small team usually, it is a team that lacks influence and the ability to actually impact the strategy that they identify as the best course of action. And so basically, you know, like where they end up is they end up in this kind of shouting into the wind in the company and getting measured on all of their output, as opposed to actually being able to like drive strategy and really shape the levers that are going to make a real impact at the bottom line level.
Okay, that's interesting. I just want to dive a little bit deeper. You know, as everybody in the audience knows, I work at AWS. I'm going to ask you a question. You know, we have people in our organization that are go-to-markets, and we have go-to-market sales, we have go-to-market industry, we have go-to-market product, then we have product. I don't know whether the product market is, but product groups, and then we have strategy people, corporate strategy, and then business strategy. So where does product marketing fit into all this?
Yeah. So it's funny because like a lot of these, like the terminology that's used for a lot of these roles, like has started to bleed into other roles. It's like sales teams are oftentimes referring to themselves as go-to-market teams now, despite the fact that like, if you talk to a lot of kind of classical marketers, they would define go-to-market as the process of bringing a new thing to market, which is actually not there is sales as a part of that, but it's ultimately about a lot of like upfront strategic positioning, messaging, pricing development that happens through that process. So basically, you know, I think the way that I define product marketing is very similar to the way that like CPG brand management is defined, which is essentially this like hybrid of product and marketing, where they are functionally the experts on the customer. They are the experts on the product. They understand all the ins and outs about like what problems the product is solving for specific customers. And they are also kind of the quarterbacks of the go-to-market organization. So when you think about the go-to-market organization holistically, that includes marketing and sales and customer success. And like to some degree, it kind of touches product as well. And product marketing is kind of like the other half of product management, where they're two sides of the same coin, and product marketing is functionally acting as the product manager for the go-to-market org, where they're the ones who are defining core strategy for how you're going to take that product and commercialize it.
Okay.
And then they're kind of orchestrating all of the activity for those teams like sales and marketing and success to ensure that that strategy is actually brought to life. So
when we talk about, you know, product marketing, you know, is defining the strategy but can't pull the strings, what are they powerless to do when we talk about that?
Oftentimes it is the ability to actually take strategy and drive it through execution, right? Because like strategy is great. There's a lot of people who do various forms of strategy within organizations, but like it never actually sees the light of day. And one of the hurdles that like companies that don't empower product marketing to actually own the execution side of the strategies that they create, that they run into, is basically that, you know, they have these really nice persona docs and positioning docs, and, you know, they've done all the work to like identify how should we talk about this thing. But then the teams that are actually responsible for getting that message into market, getting that product into market, the sales team, the success team, the marketing, the demand gen side of the marketing team, like those teams all use their own messaging. They all kind of come up with their own way of talking about it. They all come up with their own tactical execution for how they're actually, like, what channels they're going to use to drive that message out. And there's no cohesion. So typically product marketing suffers because they just don't have enough control over the actual execution side of things in order to bring the strategy that they've identified to life.
Right. I've got a bit of a side question. So have you ever come across situations where, I'm going to say product marketing, but my guess is it's more than product marketing. Messaging and go-to-market initiatives are created, and the sales organization says it's not aligned with what we're seeing with the customer. And product marketing and marketing just don't know, the voice of the customer, and then you end up with, sales organization dumping all that work and going, we're just going to make our own stuff. Have you seen that?
It's probably one of product marketers' number one complaints is that the sales team doesn't use the stuff that we created, and they don't listen to the messaging that we defined. And then the other direction, to your point, is like the sales team feels like marketing is out of touch with the customer. And I think this is a function of, just how quality your product marketing function is. Like, there are a lot of product marketing teams that for sure are disconnected from their customers. And like, oftentimes, I couldn't tell you how many product marketing teams that I talk to that are like, yeah, I asked them, when's the last time you got on a call with a customer and like talked to them directly as a human? Yeah. And, they're like, whoa, we don't do that. We just do surveys. And, it's like, we haven't talked to anybody in months. And that is a problem. Like, that will happen in those cases. Like, sales is right. Product marketing really probably shouldn't be driving messaging because they are too disconnected from the customer. But the problem is actually not that product marketing should not be driving this. It's that product marketing is not operationalized the right way, and that they're actually not doing the job with the inputs that they should be collecting. But, like, at the end of the day, sales is always going to feel like they are closer to the customer, but sales is usually taking a much more tactical approach to that messaging, right? Like, they're in one-to-one conversations. They're trying to identify, like, how do I talk about this product to this specific customer? But they lose sight of the macro picture of how does that conversation with that individual customer actually shape the like grander positioning for the product, which is a longer horizon strategy that does require more consistency over time.
So that's interesting. So that brings me on to the next question, or the next topic of this show, your personal mission to get people to understand true product marketing. Now, what I can glean from that response you just gave us is that sales is not seeing the true holistic scope of product marketing. But do you think product marketing are also misunderstanding, the situation that sales is facing? Maybe, and how does that tie into your personal mission?
Well, I think where a lot of that disconnect comes from is actually just that product marketing has a different perspective, right? Like, this is all a game of perspectives. And I always equate this to the whole like parable about the blind man and the elephant, where, you have three blind men and they're all touching an elephant, and, one's touching the trunk, one's touching the tail, one's touching the body. And like, the one touching the trunk thinks that it's a rope, and the one touching the body thinks that it's a wall, and the one touching the tail one touching the tail thinks it's a rope, the one touching the tusk thinks it's a spear. But anyway, like, so each person kind of has their own limited view of the whole, right? And so they're not able to really like, and when you start talking about the tactical kind of like market facing teams, which is sales, customer success, demand gen teams, like, those teams have very specific, somewhat siloed views of the aggregate picture of the product, what is coming down the pipe on the roadmap, what are those other teams actually struggling with, like, what messaging goals do they have. Product marketing's job is to sit at the center of all of that and to collate a lot of this information from these disparate teams that are relatively siloed from each other and act as the router. And so product marketing is like usually where a lot of the disconnect comes in people's agreement with product marketing's conclusions. Oftentimes just comes from the fact that product marketing has a more holistic perspective because they are talking to all of those teams as opposed to talking to just whatever little silo that they're looking at. So, I think where a lot of this comes from is, I'm a big believer that like a lot of the disconnect that happens within organizations' messaging stems from the lack of like centralized strategic thinking and decision making, which is ultimately what product marketing should be doing in its fully realized best state. And so you end up with like individual silos kind of making their own decisions based on their own limited subset of data. And they're not able to make
Right.
kind of holistic, big picture decisions.
It sounds like is it, and let me ask you a question. Is it more of an organizational problem rather than a misunderstanding of product marketing?
I think it is an organizational problem, but it is the misunderstanding of product marketing basically manifests in the form of how the organization actually structures product marketing's interaction with those teams. So like end of the day, yes, it is an organizational problem. Like this is just the nature of companies is as you get big, teams start getting siloed. They have, limited subsets of data that they're looking at. They're not interacting enough. There's not enough clear lines of communication. But product marketing should be acting as the glue that kind of pulls those pieces together. But if the company doesn't actually empower product marketing to do that, then those pieces still never get connected. Product marketing is just kind of running around between teams, trying their best to like firefight this.
Well, that's interesting. That will bring me on to my next question a little bit. Let me just expand on this. So the question is, what's the ideal role of product marketing in corporate strategy and development? So here's an interesting one. You've got CorporateStrategy who are developing the next 3-year roadmap on how we're going to engage the market. Where do we want to turn up? But they're not really including in that strategy, the messaging around the products. I'll give you an example. An organization might switch from being a generalist sales force to a industry sales force, and the strategy team will say, well, this is how we want to show up. This is how we're going to organize ourselves. But then product marketing continues to deliver product messaging, so it's not industry messaging. So it's all a bit, broken in my eyes. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, so I think like going back to one of your earlier questions about where does product marketing kind of sit in this mix of strategy roles inside a company, corporate strategy teams are oftentimes looking more at things that are more foundational to the company. They're like organization design and like what is the kind of very, very macro level of what product areas do we want to be kind of building into, what like technologies do we want to be investing into, that kind of stuff. And I think product marketing is much more about like the commercialization strategy for the products that are being built. So it's about like what, are we building the right products at the like product level, not necessarily at the, macro company strategy level. And are we messaging those products the correct way to the right markets? So
interesting. I want you've just tapped into something that's I'm being a bit passionate about. So product marketing really should be indexing on what their target consumers' job is that wants to be done. Yeah, and it's interesting. Product marketing. What I just heard from you is product marketing's job is not to create a set of assets for sales to go and use. Product marketing's job is to create a set of assets that consumers can recognize. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like product marketing's job is to create a consistent and understandable and aligned view of what your product is for people who are external looking in, right? So like it's to take those customers and their pains and align your messaging as well as your product roadmap to those pains in a way that customers understand why that thing is individually valuable to them, and then also what the bigger vision for the product is over a longer time horizon and how that's going to shape their experience over time.
I got a bit of a side question. That's interesting. So a sales organization or a salesperson is going to be driven by a quota. The behavior is set up by their quota, and they're going to be very tactical, strategically tactical. I don't know if that's a phrase, but anyway, tactical to actually sell something. Quite often, when you look at sales organizations, they're seeking for the customer to tell them what they need. And in this last couple of minutes, what I'm hearing is that if we trusted, or the sales organization trusted, the product marketing message, we would end up being where the consumer is looking for the product. If we switch to waiting for what the consumer wants to buy, we're probably going to just respond to a defined need and miss the opportunity to really sell the value of what we've got. My question to you really is, how can we how could we I don't know whether the word's convince, but how can we encourage the sales organization to trust that product marketing has the message that the consumer wants to hear, and not the message which is about how to drive a purchase order?
Yeah. I mean, to your point, like it is very much a reactive motion when sales is like doing discovery and then just reacting to specific things that customers have expressed that they need, which falls into the whole like Henry Ford trap of like customers are going to ask for a faster horse as opposed to asking for an automobile. And so basically like product marketing's job is to find a way to align the problems to that individual like current need for that customer, which is like, I need to get somewhere faster, but to present it through the lens of what makes that company unique and different and like the longer term vision for the product. So I think like getting sales to believe this stuff, like oftentimes it comes down to the easiest way to do this is find a salesperson who is willing to work with product marketing and show some wins. And like, salespeople, they will follow where revenue is being driven. And so if you are able to show a salesperson being more effective with that messaging, everybody else will jump on it very quickly. The other way to do it, and sometimes this stuff takes a little bit longer. And so the other way to do it is just making sure that like when you are communicating this to sales, you're not just dumping assets at them. Right? Like you have to actually provide all the context behind why those assets were created in the way that they were and why the messaging is what it is. And you have to do it like it's a relationship building exercise. You have to do internal selling and you have to gradually kind of build sales' trust that you understand their concerns and what they're hearing from the market. By presenting the voice of customer data alongside the positioning, but then help them understand why that positioning is not exactly what they're telling you that it should be.
So are you saying that a product marketeer essentially has to be a salesperson as well?
I think everybody in a company has to be a salesperson. I think everything we do is sales.
Well, yes, but I'm being very, so selling is not, you have to learn selling. So if a product marketeer just wants to identify consumer needs and create an initiative around those consumer needs, if you said, like, one of the things you said is then demonstrate to a salesperson so they can believe how they can get a win and they'll chase the money, that essentially says to me that a product marketeer has going to have to cross the chasm in their own way to actually go and sell it themselves. So they have to get out on the road and show a salesperson this is how you sell it. So are product marketing people trained to be salespeople, or do they have to go out and learn that?
They usually are not trained to do it, and they should be. I am a big believer, like when I'm building product marketing teams, I require them for at least the first couple of months that they're on the job to not necessarily carry a quota, but I require them to actually go and be a salesperson for a handful of calls on a regular basis. And they need to go actually like try and sell the product. And anytime they're testing new positioning, new messaging, do the same thing. It's like, it is not sufficient to just go and like do some surveys and do third-party analysis on what competitors are doing and what your product does. You have to actually go and like get in the wild and get in the field and try and sell it to customers to see how they react. Otherwise, you don't feel the reactions. You don't get enough of a sense for how customers are actually receiving whatever message you've created.
Would you put a product marketer through the same training regime as a salesperson to be able to go do that, or do you do something different with them?
Well, so I would do both. So, I mean, there is the whole training process that I have for product marketing teams. But at the end of the day, like I think it is important for product marketers to also understand how their salespeople are being trained, because otherwise they can't empathize with them. They can't understand like how sales is even thinking about messaging. So like I require, any product marketer that's on my team to go read the Challenger sale, read the like couple of the sales best practice books, and like go through a lot of the similar training at minimum, just so that they understand how sales thinks about things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very insightful. I'll keep that in mind in what the work I do. But let me just ask you a little bit about the consequence of misalignment, I guess. I often see sales organizations reaching out to the product teams and saying, do some training. We're missing some training. What do you say to that? Because if what we've been talking about, product marketing, is strategy, what's the purpose of field enablement if we're now asking product marketing to do training?
I mean, there's so many downstream consequences to not doing this effectively. Like the biggest thing is like kind of just in aggregate poor alignment, and poor alignment both to customer needs and language, which ends up hurting sales performance. Poor alignment for the sales team in understanding the product, which then leads to them overselling features that may not exist, which then drives a ton of downstream impact on the product team that then is getting a lot of pull from customers for something that they may not be able to or plan to build anytime soon. And it also leads to churn because customers end up closing thinking that something is coming down the pipe that sales was pitching, because they were kind of just making things up to try and overcome a lack of messaging training for the current product. And they end up disappointed when they actually get into the product. And then it also leads to customer confusion, because there is this confused execution within the organization where different teams are using different messages to align to their own individual goals, as opposed to using consistent messaging that customers are going to have one singular kind of holistic view of the product itself. So like, you got to imagine from a customer standpoint, put yourself in their shoes, them looking in at a company. There's so many messages that they're getting hit with. The sales team is telling them one thing, the support team is telling them another thing. There's a bunch of different channels that they're getting hit with on the marketing side of things. And that can create either a very large echo chamber that delivers a consistent message that gives them a very clear picture of like why that product is important for them and why it's valuable and what it does. Or it can confuse the heck out of them because they're seeing 10 different things from the same company that are all saying slightly different versions of, that message. And it's not easy for them to digest. And then they just end up bouncing away and going to a different product.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So we're going to have some people in the audience, two types of people in the audience, the product marketers and the potential executives, who need to listen in on this message as well. So my next question is really aimed at maybe asking you, what advice can you give to a product marketer who's listening to this podcast that, how can they, assert more influence and gain authority in strategic decisions? What can they do by themselves to put themselves in the right position?
So I think that there's a couple of things. One is make better use of research. So make sure that like when you are developing this, it's very common for a lot of product marketing teams to just kind of run by gut feel. And like, they're like, we're having conversations with a bunch of people internally. And like, we've kind of collated that in our head into some kind of positioning, messaging, et cetera. But the reality is like, you need to bring data. And so you need to come armed with research, voice of customer data, competitive intel that you've done that is documented and can be shared, so you can show your work to other teams. So then they're more likely to believe and trust the conclusions that you've come to. But the other thing is, I think where a lot of product marketing teams fall down is because they are not explicitly given power by top-down leadership, they end up falling into this enablement function where they're like trying to garner influence from other teams by presenting themselves as a service organization. And so they're like trying to get involved in conversations that they should be involved in by default by delivering an asset or by, working, like saying, hey, I'm going to like go do this research for you. And they basically become a service org. And what product marketing ends up doing is they end up being too nice, and they're basically not proactive enough. They're reactive to other teams' asks because they're drowning and because they've got so much on their plate and because they're trying to like push themselves into all these conversations. And so they're not proactive enough about actually just taking kind of the bull by the horns and driving this process and saying, hey, look, like organization, I am going to drive this process. I am responsible for these things. Right. This is what the process looks like. This is what a good execution of it looks like. Right. And you need to route through me for this. And it's like, you got to be a little bit of a bull in the china shop, which a lot of product marketers are not wired to do because they're so used to like having to kind of beg, borrow, and steal for influence within the organization. Okay,
side question then. KPIs. Again, to the product marketers who are listening to this, what KPIs should a product marketer want to be measured on?
So it depends on the structure of the product marketing organization. I tend to believe that product marketing, one of the most impactful metrics that they can influence, which is also one of the noisiest ones and hardest to isolate to product marketing, but it is growth rate of net revenue retention. And so product marketing has the ability to actually impact the full funnel of execution for their products. And a big portion of where they should be spending time is like the middle of funnel kind of onboarding, activation, and then that drives downstream into retention and expansion because customers better understand the products. They're more likely to have a cross-sell conversation about, something else that you can sell them because they've been had this explained to them better. And so I think growth rate of net revenue retention is something that product marketing should be aligned to. And that also aligns to like just revenue growth in general for their product line. So I believe that product marketing teams should be product line owners and they should be aligned to a product. And then the overall success or failure of that product is ultimately their, responsibility. But beyond that, like there's a bunch of kind of more specific metrics that product marketing can be measured on, depending on what product you're working on. You can look at like win rate for your product and how rapidly win rate's growing. You can look at, activation rate if they're a product marketing team that is more focused on like a PLG motion. So there's a lot of different metrics that they look at, but yeah.
I like this one, growth rate of net revenue retention. So if I'm a product marketer listening to this podcast, give me an example of what that number looks like and how an executive would be impacted by them talking to them about this number, because it stands to me that it sounds like that's a KPI that if a product marketer proactively says, even though they may not have the KPI in their personal job function, I want to measure this, it sounds like they're going to be taken seriously. It's a key data point. So what does that number look like?
100%. I mean, any product marketer, the biggest place that they fail is like a lot of product marketing teams speak kind of up in the clouds and they don't really get down to like business impact, which is, because a lot of what they do is like hard to directly attribute to these things. So, I mean, net revenue retention is basically, like the growth rate. It's the retention and expansion figure divided by your overall starting revenue. And so basically you're looking at like, how effectively are customers closing? So you're looking at a revenue figure, but then more importantly, are they activating at a good rate, which ends up driving retention downstream? Are they retaining after they have activated? Yeah. And then are they buying more over time? And so you're looking at basically like, have they bought more product or have they bought additional products from you and become a more valuable customer over a period of time? And if you look at this in aggregate across all of your different customers, you should be able to move this by creating, again, like better positioning, better messaging for those products that you are cross-selling, upselling to those customers, and creating better communication around the new things that you are shipping, because those new things that you're shipping, every single one of them is an opportunity to upsell or cross-sell that customer.
Right. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, switching gears to, thank you for that. That's interesting. To the executives who have product marketing teams running underneath them, what are the consequences for their companies when product marketing is sidelined in strategy creation?
Basically, it's a bunch of chickens running around with their head cut off. Like you have all your tactical teams that are using inconsistent messaging, which, as we were talking about earlier, kind of just confuses customers. They have an external in perception of the company that you don't really have like direct control over. And it's the sum of many different parts and many different touch points with your organization. And if the messaging is unclear or inconsistent, that is market facing, then those customers are going to have a poor experience through your sales process, which then trickles downstream into like poor conversion rates at the top of the funnel. All your advertising, all your marketing activity ends up converting worse. Your website converts worse. Your sale in the middle of the funnel, your sales close rates drop, and downstream customer retention drops because those customers don't understand the thing that they're buying in the first place. Right. And they end up basically coming in and having a confused experience and having their expectations not met.
So that we can say, so executives out there, measure your product marketing teams, if not nothing else, on net revenue retention and ask them to prove themselves, is what you're saying. And then you would see the value they bring if you anchor them around that, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's a great message to take away. Okay. There was a few more questions, but we've answered them in some of the others. But the ones I want to get into is ones I think we haven't dived into yet. Okay. What skills are crucial for product marketers to be seen as strategic leaders rather than just enablers?
Well, I think speaking back to our previous point, like there's a bunch of standard hard skills that a product marketer needs to be good at. They need to understand go-to-market strategy. They need to understand positioning. They need to understand pricing and packaging. And they need to essentially be good writers and communicators as well. But the biggest thing in order for them to be seen as strategic leaders is they need to be good at two things. They need to be good at research and collecting data to support their arguments, which ultimately is like a sales motion.
Right.
And then they need to be good at speaking in business terms, not just talking about theory and, relying on, I'm the product marketer, so what I say is the right thing. They need to be able to actually tie their work to directly measurable KPIs, which most of them don't. And, so if you are able to speak at a revenue level about the products that you're working on, you immediately will be taken more seriously and be given more ability to impact downstream strategy when you're just speaking in a more revenue aligned way.
Oh, this is awesome. This conversation is great. I had a set of questions laid out and we were already answering them before I even get to them. But here's another question. So I'm going to move a little bit to technology and then move it away from the function. But how's the evolution of marketing technology impacting the strategic role of product marketing? And I think this sort of also leads into some of the work you're doing maybe a little bit as well.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that technology shapes standards and practices for functions, right? Like, if you look in the age before CRMs, right? Like sales teams were all over the place and everybody had a different process and there wasn't really a standard for how you actually ran a sales pipeline. It was kind of whatever every individual sales rep was doing. And then, CRMs started appearing and all of a sudden you had a much more consistent process for how sales teams manage stages of pipeline and communication at those stages and forecasting. And so, I think historically product marketing has been treated as like an art, right? And it was all about just documentation and positioning and messaging and writing. And it just lived in a bunch of free-form docs and there wasn't any tools to operationalize any of the work that product marketing was doing. And so nobody understood what they did. They just saw the output, which was a copy doc, which was a document. And they're like, okay, so you guys are copywriters. And that is the lowest level of strategic impact that product marketing can have. Then what started happening is you started having a couple of point solutions pop up around specifically the research work that product marketing does. So you had a couple of like competitive intel tools like Clue and Crayon start to pop up, which help to structure and operationalize how product marketing did competitive intel. And suddenly, like, people started looking to product marketing as a much more strategic input into the sales process because they were actually delivering this like valuable competitive intel and it was structured in a way that other teams could consume and it seemed more strategic. And so, but then product marketing kind of got seen as like just the competitive intel team. And it's like, okay, product marketing, you're strategic, but you're like only strategic in this one area. And so part of why we're building Ignition is because like product marketing is this all-encompassing process that includes research, go-to-market strategy, building products, or in like the voice of customer work that informs building products, and then measurement. And so let
me just jump in there a second because I can see this going into a little bit of what Ignition does. But before you go into what Ignition does, I want to ask you a question. Certainly we've been learning a lot through what we're discussing today about the things you've identified as challenges for product marketeers. And I'm guessing that led to some level of frustration, which ended up in you realizing and starting Ignition. So just before we go into what Ignition does, tell me a little bit about your journey getting to starting Ignition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so like I started kind of doing product marketing back before the title even existed, right? Like product marketing wasn't a thing. I was a brand manager at PlayStation, which was encompassing of both product management and product marketing. And so I saw like what great really looks like in this function. And we were structured the way that like I was kind of articulating at the beginning of the show about how an optimal product marketing team would be structured. And it was great. The company was one of the most effective marketing teams that I have ever seen to date in my career. And so I saw what great looked like at the very beginning of my career. And I had a bunch of like templates and processes and whatnot that I had collected from that I then tried to bring into all the different startups that I worked in over the years. And like, I always tried to kind of like fit a square peg into a round hole. And I had this process that worked really well, but like the organization didn't really understand what that process should look like. And so it was really hard to actually roll out across the broader organization. And part of the reason that it was hard to roll out was that there was no actual automation to it, right? I was kind of trying to like force a process on the organization without any tooling. And I would share, a document or a template or something like that. And people were like, okay, well, this seems like your template. Is this the right way of doing this? Like, there's always this inherent doubt around a new process when there's no actual third-party codification of it.
Right.
And so I got frustrated because I tried to build this process out in every like tool and template under the sun. And I was always drowning so much from all the work that I had to do. Like, product marketing is a very intensive job, both in terms of like the amount of output of content that you're creating, but then also because you're creating plans, you're creating the actual content itself to feed those plans, you're creating tons of internal communication to try and disseminate information across the organization. And then you're also doing all the research and doing all the input work to collect competitive intel, to collect customer research, to feed into those plans and content. And basically, I was drowning so much that I wasn't able to actually build a process. And this was especially true at startups, whether they were early stage or mid stage, where there's so much work to do. You can't actually operationalize it in a way that allows you to do all of the work that a product marketer should be doing. And I wasn't able to be strategic because I was just doing day-to-day execution of writing collateral. And so I was like, I need a tool for this. And I got frustrated and basically decided I've tried to build this in every tool that's like horizontal and not built around product marketing as a function previously, and none of them worked.
So let's talk about Ignition then. So, that really lays the foundation of, the why Ignition exists. So what does Ignition do, to help product marketers, especially those who are listening, both executives and, product marketers?
Yeah, so I mean, we're like this big holistic platform for kind of managing the full product lifecycle. So we actually are a combination product marketing, product management platform where we help the product marketing team by themselves to integrate into the product team's work, but we can also help the product team to do a lot of the kind of other side of product marketing, which is the product management and build side. Right. So basically upfront, we've got a bunch of research tools where we help to automate collecting competitive intelligence and collecting and aggregating voice of customer data. And then we analyze all of that stuff under the hood with AI, and we help to extract product ideas for what to build. So we help the product team to prioritize building the right things based on customer jobs to be done and needs. Then we hand that off into a go-to-market planning motion. So we help to launch the product and announce it to customers. And so we build out go-to-market plans with a bunch of like best practice-based cascading workflow that basically structures a go-to-market plan based on the thing that you're launching. And then we help orchestrate and enable that across the organization. So we create all the content for that launch plan, and then we push it outwards to the teams that need it, like sales and success.
It's basically an enterprise business process workflow for product marketing.
Yeah, it's essentially an end-to-end workflow for like bringing a new thing to market.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's amazing because that certainly could help break down the silos and unite people. Would that be right? It's almost like a RevOps framework for product marketing.
Very much so. And like one of the core things that we do is we try and make it so that, those other teams, obviously you want to break down silos, but nobody wants to go adopt a new tool and jump into a new thing. And so we try and make it very easy for you to collect information to reduce the siloing of data.
Yeah.
And we do that through a lot of integration work. And so that other teams don't need to like jump into the tool to do it. But then we push that information outwards to those teams. So we do a lot of like internal comms automation to try and communicate outwards to them again, so that they don't need to like come into a tool to get information out. They can get updates on status, messaging, positioning, all that stuff just directly in their CRM or in their inbox.
Wow. It's almost like product marketing ops. I don't know whether it's worth coining a new strategy framework there, but that sounds pretty amazing. Okay, well, is there anybody else doing this other than yourselves, or are you one of the only ones out there doing it?
There's not really anybody doing exactly this. I mean, there's obviously our product kind of consists of multiple categories of tools kind of mashed together, because that's sort of what product marketing as a function is. And so, there's obviously like point solutions like Cran and Clue for competitive intelligence, and there's a lot of teams are like currently using today some kind of like project management tool for a lot of the like status tracking and communication and coordination around their launch planning. But nobody's really doing like exactly what we're doing today. And there's, some stuff that's adjacent, but we're kind of the only game in town when it comes to like true product marketing operations.
I got to say, if I was looking for this type of cohesion in my organization, and I was going to go and choose a platform, and maybe you can say this is right or wrong. If somebody comes to Ignition and say, "Hey, talk about this platform," I think your experience brings a lot of value to the decision making and bringing the platform. So, do you actually personally work with companies to go through that process? Because I guess it's not just about the platform; it's getting your experience of, "Hey, are you suffering these challenges?" And this is where you plug them in. Do you get involved in every single dialogue that you have with the companies that talk to you?
Very much so. I mean, I like a lot of my experience is baked into best practices in the tool that we've kind of productized. But like when it comes to actual live human-to-human interaction, I'm our primary support person. I'm always going to be our primary support person.
Right.
I basically like try and interact with every single customer that we have. And I am available as, a consultant basically for any company that is trying to establish this new process and figure out how to roll it out and how to better operationalize these teams.
Yeah. So I guess a first step would be leverage somebody like you to see what's going on in your organization. And the secondary step is, does a platform like Ignition work for solving those problems? Would I be right?
Yeah, very much so.
Awesome. Great. Hey, listen, we've gone through a fair bit today. I want to transition a little bit about you again before we close off. So, who are your favorite people in this field that you look up to or follow or would recommend that we follow?
So I'm a huge fan. I mean, April Dunford is my favorite product marketer of all time. And I think she's both entertaining and also just a great positioning expert. I've really liked Anthony Pieri is one of the kind of newer ones on the block. And I think he's doing some great work around messaging and like framing visually kind of how a lot of these product marketing frameworks actually play out. So there are a couple of my favorites. I mean, the Product Marketing Alliance folks have some great content as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. What's the favorite part of your job?
I think my favorite part recently has been actually acting as like kind of our AI engineer and building out the AI tools for the things that I always did manually as a product marketer. And so it's been really fun, like seeing those actually get operationalized in ways that like literally weren't possible, prior to the last couple of years.
Awesome. Bit of a rapid fire for you. What's your favorite book?
Business book is the old positioning book by Al Reese, but I think personal book is a book called Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson.
Awesome. What's your favorite movie or show?
Braveheart.
Okay. What's your favorite meal?
Steak at the Ringside in Portland.
Oh, nice. What's your favorite album or song?
A song called Old Thing Back by Matoma that I really like.
Okay, cool. Where can people go to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I post pretty regularly there, so I'm pretty easy to find. But I think my handle is Derek Osgood 3 on there if you want to look me up there, and Ignition's at haveignition.com if you want to come check it out.
Yeah, we'll put those links in the podcast notes below. Also, we'll get your book list as well and the other recommendations. So anybody wanting to look up Derek, you can go into the podcast notes and we'll have them all there. What can people expect from you next?
I mean, we are doing our big Ignition 2.0 launch in about 2 weeks from now. So I'm guessing it's probably going to be about a week after this publishes, but we're doing a big announcement. We're going to be launching a whole bunch of new AI features. And so keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there a final thought you want to leave to our listeners?
Go research product marketing, but look at it through the lens of brand management, because I think it's you're going to get a much more holistic view of what the role is. Awesome.
Thank you. And is there anything we haven't covered that you would definitely like to say before we close out?
I think we covered a lot of ground. I don't know if I have any more nuggets of wisdom here.
I think you got a lot. It's just that we can't think about them today. So how can listeners support your work?
Would love to chat with anybody that is curious about product marketing. Come check out Ignition, but otherwise, just engage with us on LinkedIn and come have
Reach
conversations.
out to you, send an email, and open a discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome, good. And what would you be hoping to learn from people, and how would that help you, do you think?
I'd love to just understand people's problems. I think it's always helpful for me to get a sense for like where product marketing gaps are within your organization, but also like what you've seen that's worked, like the ways that you've solved these, because that helps us shape kind of how we approach our problem solving as well.
Awesome. And final question before we say bye-bye. What was your favorite part of this episode?
Ooh, there's a bunch of them. I don't know. I feel like I always really enjoy chatting about like the metrics for product marketing, because it's an area that doesn't get talked about enough. So I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining today, Derek. It's been very, very insightful. It's certainly a side of product marketing that I hadn't thought about. And, certainly, hopefully the audience has taken a lot back from whether you're a product marketer or whether you're an executive with a product marketing team. Hopefully there's been some insights there for you. So thank you very much, Derek, for joining us today. I've been really, really privileged to have you on the show. I'm hoping everybody else will have taken a lot of value away from it. And I encourage everybody to reach out to Derek and engage in a conversation with him, because it sounds like he can add value. And I would shamelessly put a plug in for his platform as well, because I haven't heard of anything like it, and I think it's much needed. And too many organizations today operate in silos, and it's quite painful for the customer in the end. And bringing everybody together can only be better for your customer. So with that, I want to say thank you very much to Derek. Thank you very much to the audience, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you soon. Speak to you next time on the next episode.